I hope you're all settled in from lunch. It's always the enviable position to be in a panel, being on the panel that's directly after lunch, so if your heads start to drop, I'll understand. I thought this morning's panels were really fascinating. Some interesting discussion. Interesting note, I keep track of things like this. The word money was not mentioned until about 10 to 11, which for this group of people I think is somewhat unique, because that's really what this panel is about and why I have the utmost respect for the members of this panel. We can talk about rights, we can discuss, debate issues of distribution methods, manners, and rules, but it is licensing that really executes the rights on behalf of all of our members. These gentlemen are responsible for the day-to-day activities that takes the rights of our members and affiliates and monetizes them in a vast and diversified marketplace. I know we're not supposed to go through introductions, so I'll just give you their names and titles. Alan Bouchin is the Executive Director, Data Management for the PRS. Next to him is Greg Riggle, who is Vice President, Broadcast Licensing for SESAC. Next to him is John Simpson. John is the Executive Director of the Sound Exchange. Next to John is the CEO of the Harry Fox Agency, Gary Chergin, and the Vice President, Business Affairs for Licensing for BMI is Mike Steinberg. I thought what we would do, a couple of the issues that we're going to go over is the conditions and licensing techniques that each of us use, what our abilities are and what changes have been made in tracking performances, special licensing issues, some technology issues. So I thought that we would start by asking each of them to briefly describe the manner in which you license users, what your approach is. Greg, do you want to start?
Sure. I probably should make a disclaimer or two. I think your materials say that I am Hunter Williams. I think Hunter would appreciate it if I made that disclaimer. I am not. In the event I say something inappropriate, he would not want that attributed to him. So that's the disclaimer. SESAC currently licenses over 65 industries. We have specific performance license agreements. They contain standardized grants of authorization, and most apply annual fee schedules with fee determinants that are based on market factors that are unique to each industry. Our licensing team, we work hard developing, we identify music users, we identify contacts, we develop appropriate agreements, we educate the issues of license agreements, and we have an administration division which works closely with licensing in order to develop and implement strategies and processes to support those licenses. We utilize a variety of technological solutions in service to licensing our customers. One thing we have is a proprietary auto mail system. We call it auto mail. It's actually a combination of traditional print letters as well as email correspondence, and we're actually developing some text messaging at this point. And basically what the auto mail system does is it's developed to educate potential licensees, the benefits of the license, and the letter series escalate in regard to the information that is provided, and informing people of their obligation under the law. We also have an assortment of internet-based tools that allows us to complete a license. Once a license is completed, we have systems whereby licensees can pay their license fees online. They can view account information, billing histories, update their accounts with regard to fee determinants, and that's proved to be successful for us as well. With regard to the primary sources of licensing income, and the thing that I'm primarily responsible for is radio and the associated digital platforms that radio is bringing forth. In radio, SESAC has a 5-year fee schedule that's promulgated to the industry. It's industry accepted. It's based upon what we call a station market classification, which is basically the market the station appears in, and also, in essence, a proxy of revenue, which is the station's highest 60-second spot rate. That, over the years, has proved to be effective because it basically denotes the position that the station has in the marketplace and their success. Certainly, our writers and publishers and the SESAC represented works that they use play a part in that. In television, we have local station fees that are basically market pool based. Those are allocated by the Television Music Licensing Committee. We have network television licenses that are negotiated. Satellite and cable are negotiated, typically based on subscribers. In aggregate, we have what we call general licensing, which is anything basically non-broadcast. It actually includes some of our digital platforms now. Those licenses are all standardized grants of authorization. They're based upon industry factors. For example, hotels would be number of rooms times an average room rate, for example, that they command in the market. And then there would be typically a revenue multiplier applied to that to arrive at an applicable fee. Those are the major licensees. The interesting thing about licensing these days is, as most of you know, that the licensees that I just mentioned are traditional, and they're all extremely mature businesses. The great thing about licensing these days is that in order to compete, these traditional businesses have to expand across a number of different platforms. So it's given us an opportunity to license new platforms, new uses, new technologies, but with the basis of understanding that these traditional licensees have. They recognize the importance and the obligation of performing rights. New media and digital platforms. I don't know if you want me to go into that, or we're going to go over that separately.
No, go ahead.
Okay. We currently offer digital broadcast authorization separate from our analog authorization. I know that some performing rights organizations don't do that, but in radio, for example, we grant a digital authorization. It's actually an amendment to our analog license. It's an applicable fee of approximately 10% of the analog fee per digital channel. So, we're very bullish about HD radio. Contrary to, I think, some of the comments that were made earlier, I think that it certainly has the ability to expand the audience. And some of the things that weren't discussed were the ideas of branding and certainly data delivery, which basically draws people back to the main analog signal for as long as it's there. So we're bullish on it. There are currently, I think, about 1,500 stations that are experimenting with digital, and we've got that license in the marketplace. Which, with regard to television, digital television broadcasts are currently authorized in our agreement with the TMLC. Internet licensing, standard agreements. We have a number of standard agreements out in the marketplace. They authorize streaming. They authorize audio only. We have a broader grant available, audio visual, audio video, and we negotiate for other services as well. The fee for our basic internet license is based on a measurement of basically listenership or viewership of the stream, which is aggregate tuning hours. We also have experimental licenses out there granting internet video syndication. As you're all aware, there's a new use. Every quarter we find new uses in the digital spectrum. So we have a fun time trying to wrap our heads around applicable licenses and fees. We also license wireless digital platforms as well. We feel like we've been very responsive. We're a small organization, but we're progressive. We feel like we've been very responsive to licensees as they bring us these opportunities, and I feel like we've done an effective job at that. I think that there are some digital challenges which we have to, maybe we can get the panel to discuss. For music users and content providers, they're under, and I think this was mentioned earlier as well, they're under increasing pressure to broaden their authorization as they deliver digital content down the line, down market. You know, we have requests for through-to-the-viewer video authorization consistently. And so that's a challenge for us, because we want the ability to, you know, market the retransmission, or rather license the retransmission down market. I think our digital keys, as far as our philosophy of licensing is concerned, we like to keep things experimental. We usually insist upon some language that denotes non-precedential and non-prejudicial. And we also like to limit the terms, because quite frankly, I mean, the users as well as collective agencies recognize that we're sometimes not so good at predicting the future. So we like limited terms as well. So I think that's an overview for now. Sorry to be so long-winded.
That's quite okay. Why don't we stay on the theme of performing rights?
We have an hour and 45 minutes. So
Michael, do you want to take us through a description of how
Sure.
BMI?
Absolutely. I would say that, as simply as I can put it, BMI licenses any business that performs music publicly. And if you look at the copyright law, it sort of bifurcates it between public performing rights between music that's performed in public places, which, as Greg described, is sort of the general licensing part of our business, which is hotels, motels, restaurants, background music services, where the public gathers and hears music. The other part of the copyright law talks about transmissions, and so that, you know, neatly equates to our media and new media licensing business, which is all about transmitting music, you know, over wires, by satellite, or whatever means there is today. And you know, the structures, while they may not be the same, I think among the PROs, you hear the same things over and over again if you talk to us. In our general licensing area, we have flat fees that are paid to BMI, but they usually are tied to some kind of metric, whether it's revenue, expenses of the business, attendance, occupancy. They vary from category to category. And there's also a percentage of revenue category as well within general licensing. Our media licensing historically had been percentage of revenue, and migrated more so to, in more recent years, to flat fee, although our cable network licenses are largely percentage of revenue. And the flat fee licenses that we have in the media world are different than just sort of a one-off license. We negotiate, as many of you may know, with industry-wide organizations that represent thousands of radio stations or thousands of television stations, and those organizations in turn, once an agreement is reached, then allocate the industry-wide fee to their constituent stations. So those organizations are responsible for the actual fee allocation. And within those radio and TV licenses, terrestrial radio and TV are options that stations have to take what's called a program license, which allows them to limit the fees that they pay to performing rights organizations, so long as they're able to otherwise clear the music that they have in their schedules. And our new media licenses are largely music services or websites that use music, or other forms of streaming, whether it's mobile, broadband, or otherwise. And largely those licenses you'll find are on a percentage of revenue. I think, as Greg mentioned, we've had online licensing within our new media digital space for quite a while now, a number of years, and what we're trying to move towards with some of our other licensing is an online application which will enable greater facility in getting our general licensees licensed, and it's still a very, very small money per license business, and so it's still going to be very time consuming, but the hope is that the move towards online licensing will be a benefit to us and to the licensees, and allow us to distribute more and more royalties in the end. I mean, in terms of structure, I'm sure many people in the room are familiar with BMI's obligations in terms of licensing with respect to its consent decree. We have a consent decree with the U.S. government, and we're required under that consent decree to license anyone, any business that asks us for a license. And so as soon as we get an application, a letter, technically the entity is licensed from the point in time that we receive that application. And it, presents problems in some respects, but it's a great aid to us in getting to license fees that both parties can agree on quicker. So there are pluses and minuses to everything. If we aren't able to agree to a license fee with a particular industry or a particular licensee that has requested a license, we have sort of a backstop in the federal district court in New York, where there's a judge that sits and hears BMI cases among other cases that he hears, Judge Stanton, and there's a similar judge that hears ASCAP cases, and he's there to decide what the fee should be if the parties can't agree to what that fee is. And usually, we're able to come to an agreement, but sometimes the judge has to be called upon to set the appropriate fee. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of structure, but I think we'll get more into some other
I guess from the last performing rights standpoint, how performing rights are, the PRS, and perhaps this is some of the things that we think in New York and
Thanks, Vinny. I have a great disclaimer up front, being Director of Data Management. I don't do anything to licensing myself directly, so good news for me. And the reason it's good news for me is we have a pretty tough copyright tribunal in the UK. Over the years, have looked on our licensing very unfavourably and generally favoured the user side of the copyright rules. So some of our tariffs are pitched relatively low compared to other European societies, and we're pitched to this tribunal to some degree. Recently, though, and I'm going to come on to this, we've had some success with the tribunal on the online side, shortly. But generally speaking, I guess like all rights societies, we all basically do the same way. Basically, we like revenue. We have a certain number of flat fee basis licenses. That's the biggest one. Most recently is we have a new license with the BBC in the UK, which is a flat fee basis, but it's linked to a monthly use. And for us, it was quite important because it's the first license we issued for both rights. Historically, PRS and MTPS have issued separate licenses, and this was a license for both rights combined. And we were pretty pleased with that result. It runs through to 2009. I don't know if you saw the news yesterday about the BBC, but we're particularly pleased because the BBC are looking at a $4 billion budget shortfall. How can they look to lay off 3,000 people? So we think the squeeze is on the BBC, so we're pretty happy to have a deal this last 15 years. On the public performance side, we have a very standard set of tariffs based on essentially music usage and the equipment being used in the various scenarios. Very successful business for us. We're up to around £110 million a year turnover. They can get some of the licensing directly on our website, other ways are just already licensed in normal fashion. And on the online side, well, you probably are familiar with the tribunal we just went through in the UK online, which is very tough tribunal. We came out the other side of it. I think we're quite comfortable where that ended up. It could have been worse, but essentially we ended up with a combined tariff of 8% of gross revenue, with a 4p minimum per track. Not so good on the interactive, but still not bad on interactive webcasting. It's 6.5% per track, and on pure webcasting it's 5.25%, 5% per fee per track. So on that side, and in terms of terrestrial in the UK, we're pretty well settled. A lot of discussion this morning about Europe, and it's very fascinating to be there. There's not that many Europeans here, so it's pretty interesting to see where everybody feels on this side of the pond and what's happening on our side of the pond. We're in a very interesting market, and there's lots of developments on this side. From our perspective at the MCS PRS Alliance, we're looking at a kind of option-free move. So we had formed, for example, a joint company with Gamer in Germany called CELAS, Central European Licensing Administration Service. And that's one of the first option-free environments that are happening in Europe. It's strictly for EMI. EMI went to tender in Europe and asked for service from the various PROs in Europe. And we've got that deal with Gamer. And we're working hard on how we're going to administer that deal. And as we all talked about this morning, this is a completely new way of business. So it's very interesting how we're going to do this business. Working for a particular member, non-territorial manufacturer across Europe, trying to administer for them particular set of rights and effectively bolster their income by ensuring the collective national funds or mining clients. So it's an interesting environment we're working in Europe. It's very different types to it. And essentially that's how we are in the UK.
Let's move on to mechanical licensing. Dealing with Harry Fox, can you take us through how you prepare for your licensing?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here today. This is really terrific, and to have the opportunity to hear all the different points of view has been most instructive. Just to give you sort of a sense, everybody talks about HFA, and it's been around for a very long time. But I think what would be helpful in sort of giving you sort of a sense of scale as to what we face in the licensing world. First of all, on the client side, we have about 35,000 affiliated publishers. And in 2006 alone, we issued about 1.5 million mechanical licenses, and we administer close to 12 million licenses. And so for 140 people, I guess the little engine could, in fact. Over 1,300 manufacturers or users have requested licenses in the past year. We have over 5,000 user accounts, and those users now are not just record companies, but they're in fact users of other rights other than the mechanical right. And our principal area of licensing really relates to Section 115 of the Copyright Act, which relates to the manufacture and distribution of phono recordings. And so that's our sweet spot, our core business. And in the olden days, I guess before around 2002, 2001, we would do about 260,000 licenses for physical product every year. What's so fascinating is even today, that's about the same volume of licensing that we do for physical product. So independent of what's going on in the space, the amount of product that's looking to be licensed, how much of that product actually turns into recordings is something else. But the fact is that it's really kind of interesting that that's what's going on out there, that there's still, the desire is not necessarily being stifled, the desire to create and to present music is not necessarily being stifled because of what's going on in the world right now. We do spend a lot of time talking to a lot of very different people who want to come in and license. And this year alone, through September 30th, our business development folks have met with 658 different companies to discuss licensing possibilities, and all the way from background music companies to content identification and metadata companies. And so the range and the depth of people who are interested in licensing the works that we represent on a non-exclusive basis is really very, very broad. Through over a 5-year period, again, sort of to give you sort of a sense of scale, from 2002 until through year-to-date 2007, we actually concluded almost 1,400 agreements with different entities for the use of our publishers' works. And as the process works, and the process has worked, basically somebody comes and really applies for a license, and we sit down with them and just make sure that they understand what all the requirements are that are associated with that license. The two principal configurations or uses, the on-demand stream and a tethered download, although they have been acknowledged as DPDs, part of an agreement that was done with the RIAA in 2001, 2002, was a license which was offered, which had a rate that was to be determined at some point in time in the future. That point in time in the future, 5 years later, is now, and we're currently involved with the CRB in establishing the rate for those, as well as all of the other configurations that we represent or that are involved with in terms of our publishers. And once that process winds its way through, by sometime next year, around the third quarter, we expect that we'll have a rate, and we'll be able to then be able to distribute those monies back to our publishers, who in turn will be able to distribute those monies to their songwriters. So the excitement for us is really not to bet on one particular horse or one particular type of way of doing business, but really to, in effect, to own the racetrack and to be able to be adept and agile at being able to respond to what goes on or what will go on within the industry. We don't sit there and decide, what's going to be successful or what's not going to be successful, because I think it's very, very early, despite how long we've been going through this long, cold winter. It's still too early to say as to what it is, which one is going to be the winner, whether it's going to be some revenue share or some other process, some other pricing model that takes place, and some other user experience. That's yet to be determined. And so we view that our role is to be able to enable the licensing of the works which the publishers represent in a way that's easy for them to do and to interact with us. And clearly there are limitations as to what we can and can't do, and some of those limitations are that we can only represent the publishers that we represent. And clearly one of the biggest areas of discussion is the fact that how does a licensee go and find the other publishers that we don't represent? And there was some allusion to that discussion in the last panel as to, that is a natural complexity because we don't represent everybody. But the fact of the matter is that what we do is we do bring these deals to our publishers, and they in turn have the opportunity to opt into those deals, and the user then has the access to those works and the licensing of those works at the price that was agreed to by the publishers, not by Harry Fox. So that's really how the licensing works. We have the ability to service all levels of sophistication of licensees, whether it's a large company that comes in and says, I have 400,000 license requests, to someone who wants to come in and onto our website and says, I'd like to put together a virtual album of DPDs and come and actually license online using a credit card and paying some fees and basically prepaying for the use of those songs. And so we've got someone who's internet enabled. We also have someone who can handle 400,000 or 500,000 license requests, as well as there are still those outliers that are there that even in the year 2007 that still come in and want a license by paper. And that never ceases to amaze us. So the fact of the matter is that there are many levels of sophistication of users out there and technological sophistication despite the fact that they may, in fact, be able to deliver a consumer technology, most of them don't have the back end to be able to support it, whether it's the administration of the licenses or, in fact, to be able to calculate royalties and pay those royalties on a timely and efficient and effective basis. So that's our work. Thank you.
Before I turn it over to the new kid on the block, trying to save John Simpson, I find it interesting calling the new kid on the block because if you read his bio, it's really, you ought to do it. It's a great read. He's done it all. I mean, he started as a songwriter, was a recording artist, was involved in artist management. These artists have won 6 Grammys or so. And then I think the most recent thing in his bio was that he won an outstanding volunteer lawyer for the arts in Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much.
We're waiting for the
I opened for Jethro Tull on the Aqualung tour, and to have 4,000 people yelling, "You suck, we want Tull," really had a huge impact on my career path, especially when I noticed my parents in the 4th row were yelling with them. So it was just very tough. We are a performing rights organization, as are those sitting around me, other than Gary, of course. But we administer the sound recording. Actually, it's broadcast right now in the United States. We really don't have a performance right to collect from works publicly performed. It always annoys me when I'm in a baseball game and I hear Deo, and I know that the songwriter's getting paid for that, but Mr. Belafonte is not. It's just not fair. But we do have rights now here in the United States to collect for internet, cable, satellite, digital transmissions. The only exception to that is the broadcasters, when they were grateful enough to give us this right in 1995, put in an exemption for themselves when they went to HD or digital audio broadcasting. So they are still exempt, though they do have to pay when they're online simulcasting their signals, although they didn't like that decision either and actually filed a suit. I think it was called Bonneville versus Peters, and here she is. So, and they lost in the Third Circuit court and have been paying us since. And those are checks I really, really treasure. But in any event, our rights, we do have a compulsory license. So, you know, it was raised this morning. I don't like compulsory licenses any more than anyone else, but our philosophy about compulsory licenses is that if the track is Smells Like Teen Spirit by Kurt Cobain, Nirvana, or my album, though it's a collector's item, you set the rate at Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. You set it at Smells Like Teen Spirit. You don't set it, you know, for the works that are not as valuable. You have to set it that way because they can play whatever they want under the license. They can use the most valuable works. The compulsory license, you know, is such that we have to go out and try to reach voluntary agreements with our licensees in a lot of different categories, by the way. We have business establishments, which is a service that we provide only to record companies. We have the satellite digital audio radio services that are known as XM and Sirius satellite radio. We have pre-existing satellite services. Those were the services you got on your cable systems, the blue screen channels of music way up at the end of the cable dial, Music Choice, Muzak, and DMX, who went into bankruptcy, succeeded by Capstar. Those were 3 grandfathered services. We now have new services taking their place. We call them PES Lite. These are all proceedings that we have to try to negotiate deals. If we can't negotiate, we go before the CRB. As all of you know, before that, we went to the CART, the compulsory arbitrations. People didn't like those, so they replaced them with these copyright royalty judges, the CRB. And since our first decision in March came down, they don't like that anymore either, and they want a new procedure. And, of course, they'll want a new process until they get the rate they want. You know, it's different than the Section 115 license in that we have categories. So we have commercial broadcasters and we have non-commercial broadcasters who pay at different rates. So we have to administer a number of different licenses within Section 114, in addition to having different kinds of licensees. All of the rates are published on our website because it is a statutory license and because the rates are set on a congressionally mandated procedure. So if you want to know what the license rates are, you can go there. I'm happy to go into them if you want, but some are on a percentage of revenue, others are on a per stream basis, a per track per stream where you pay by the usage. In the first case that came down recently, the Copyright Royalty Board seemed to indicate a preference for a usage metrics, a per track per stream. You paid by what you use as opposed to a percentage of revenue. And I think the rationale, which was very similar, actually the rationale that came down by the arbitrators in 2002 was, if two people use the same amount of music and one monetizes it really well and one doesn't, we're being penalized in one case and the user is being penalized in the other. We may be getting overpaid by the guy who's really making a lot of money using a certain amount of music, and we may be getting well underpaid by someone using the same amount of music but making 100th of what the other person's making. So they really have shown a preference for a usage kind of metric, though we do have, as I said, a percentage of revenue rate in some of the other license situations. Sound Exchange, we really see ourselves as a service organization. We are providing a service to 28,000 performers who signed up with us, 3,500 independent labels, and the 4.5 major labels. And we are there to provide service to them as best we can. We do reciprocal agreements internationally. We have started working with overseas, typically in Europe, they're known as neighboring rights. Really, they're performing rights organizations on the sound recording as opposed to the musical work. We have a deal with PPL in the UK, with Sena in the Netherlands. We're very close to a deal in Spain. We're the new kids on the block, as was mentioned. We started in 2000, had our first distribution in 2001, so this is very new. By contrast, that first distribution, which was 1996 to 2000, which was $6.2 million in revenue. This past year, 2006, we did about $63 million, and this year we expect to pass $100 million. And that basically puts us in the top 5 neighboring rights societies worldwide, and that's still without a terrestrial broadcast right, which I'll get to later. But anyway, we are working very hard in a number of ways. Because our rights are digital, we have very different issues than ASCAP, BMI, and SESAC, who do have to go out into the clubs and have, I'd love to have these problems, by the way, but, when you get your stream, I'd say there's 20 major companies, including satellite radio companies, who pay 95% of our royalties. And those companies, for the most part, give us complete census data of everything they play. So last year we processed 1 billion tracks on track level, down to who the artist was, it's not always easy to know who the artist is, by the way, on the track, especially in these days where you have Little Kim featuring Britney Spears with special guest Paul McCartney. That hasn't happened yet, but it will soon. I guarantee it. Or you have symphonies with conductors and featured soloists. We've tried to include the music community as we've gone along to create this, talking to other societies about how they do these rules. A certain percentage of the money goes to non-featured performers. 5% of our royalties go to a fund that's administered by the AFM and AFTRA. 45% goes to the featured performer. 50% goes to the copyright owner of the sound recording. Typically that's a record label, but it also may be the artist, and more increasingly it is the artist. And so, we have a lot of interesting issues on the distribution side. We've tried to do a pure pay-for-play model. Clearly we follow the dollar. In those situations where it doesn't make sense to get that granular, we'll figure out proxies if we have to. But our first preference is to do pure pay-for-play. And I think in the digital world, you can do that. Right now, we're about 4 to 5 months in arrears from when we get data to when we distribute. We've had some hiccups in that. Satellite radio has been very good about reporting. Webcasters, not so good. We got no reports of use from webcasters until very recently. And so there's a big catch-up that's going on right now with trying to process webcasting logs as they're coming in. We did not get census data from webcasters in our proceeding. The CRB only gave us a 2-week sample for every quarter. And they didn't specify which 2 weeks, which led me to worry that in the fourth quarter, if we got the 2 weeks before Christmas, it might be a pretty slanted sample. But in any event, we've negotiated with some of the largest players in exchange for some concessions census data, which makes us very happy. So we will be getting census data, and it will just start coming in now. So we've been having a lot of interesting questions about that. But I think, I remember 5 years ago, 6 years ago, everyone saying, oh, well, with the metadata and this and that, you're going to be able to distribute money instantaneously. If you see the data that we get, and I'm sure everyone else here can testify to that, and we do get a big pool of money. If any of you want to start a band called Various Artists, I've got a big check.
When the CRB came down with the decision on the rates, and then I started to read all the screaming that went on in the music community about how high the rates were. I had two thoughts. One, I thought to myself, welcome to the world of performing rights. It doesn't matter whether it's sound recording or musical composition. The other thing I did is look math. And if you really look at it and say that an average internet radio listener listens for about 40 hours a month, one webcast, it really works out to is about 68 cents a month is what they're going to pay in performance for the sound recording. Don't imagine that anybody's subscription to that web radio station is less than 68 cents. I mean, there's a fair amount of money. And it simply reminded me that certainly BNI and SESAC and ASCAP all know when dealing with users, there is no price that is low enough for them. Traditionally, we sit down, whether it's a large group like the radio broadcasters, television broadcasters, or now cable program service, sit down to negotiate a license, and you can see what the meeting starts off with. We paid you way too much money in the last term. We overpaid you. Another insight I can give you in terms of the negotiations and the posture that takes place. I sat down with the radio music licensing committee, and it was about 4 years ago. They opened the meeting by literally sitting there and saying, music is not important to radio. These are the music formatted stations. That was their opening line. And, they sit there and they try to explain to you that, basically we all play the same music if we're in the same genre. So here in Nashville, for example, we have a country music radio station. Well, we happen to have a country music radio station that's currently on the market. There's another country music station that may be ranked 7th or 8th in the market. And the argument that they will make is, well, they're both playing the same music. So it isn't the music that's really of any value for the radio station. You sit there and you try to explain to them something that, their understanding 50 years ago should be comprehend the fact that it isn't the music that they're using, it's the music that our members continue to perform. And how long will a station be number one if it played the same music over and over again? And that's the big difference. And I think that's something that there isn't a full understanding of the value of delivering that type of music under license. Some of the other changes that we have seen, video on demand, particularly in cable. Michael, can you speak a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. We license on a wide scale video on demand on cable. As I think many people are aware, cable television in the U.S. has marketed and used video on demand in a large way as a competitive edge to DBS satellite because of the two-way nature of cable pipe, which you can't accomplish yet with DBS. They're able to give viewers, subscribers, the opportunity to watch programming when they want it, whenever they want it, as many times as they want it. And although satellite has came up with surrogates using TiVo devices and dumping programming into the devices that you might want to watch, still it's not a pure video on demand experience. The problems that we've seen, though, is in creating this basically groundswell of excitement over video on demand among subscribers. They basically got the MSOs, which largely led by Comcast, got programming services to provide programming to them at no cost, and they're putting them on these digital video on demand tiers. And when it comes time to saying, well, what do we get from this? The answer is, oh, you start making money when we start making money out of it. And we're not making any money out of it. In fact, the MSOs are forcing us to give them this programming, and they're forcing us to provide the programming with all of the rights included. So guess what? We need that from you. And there's some argument there's value lost in that proposition. It's not really in terms of dollars generated so quantifiable right now, and the real success stories in the U.S. at least for video on demand, at least if you read the press, has been with the subscription video on demand offered by HBO and some other services, and the free on demand it's taking off, but it's competing also with TiVo devices. Why do I need to watch it on demand if I've already TiVo'd it? And the answer is, people I think are starting to realize that TiVo, if they want to fast forward through commercials, they actually have to sit there and do it. Whereas at least the free on demand, there are some promotional announcements that usually appear before and after the segment. And what we're seeing from a lot of the cable networks that are successful at this are sort of people coming home and watching programming that they would have watched otherwise, not necessarily what was sort of promised at the beginning when I think many of us sat through conferences where they talked about the coming of video on demand and it was going to change the world. People thought, that viewers were going to go home and watch sewing, how to sew, and how to play your guitar, and there are a bunch of services that came along. I don't really know whether that's the way people are using it. I think it remains to be seen. I don't see those types of services so prominently displayed as they once said they would be. But you see the typical, at least what I see in terms of the prominently displayed video on demand programming on my service at home, which is Time Warner, are the channels that I would typically hear people watching, the types of programs that you would normally watch in a linear format are just as successful or finding their success in video on demand. So monetarily, it remains to be seen how performing rights organizations can make out on this, but it's definitely spreading, at least in the U.S.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and we of course license as well VOD inside the negotiation with cable. But I think the subscription model. I mean, there's varying reports, but I think the subscription model, the traditional cable delivered subscription model, it could be slowing. I mean, as early as 2005, they talked about between 10 and 20% increases in that marketplace, and I don't know that that's occurring. I do think it's interesting. Michael mentions this kind of other programming, the underwater basket weaving channel, and things like that. As to the fragmentation in the market, and as to whether or not that works, I think that services like YouTube and internet-based audio video, that is much more, I believe, instantaneous and much more interactive. I think that's where a lot of the interest in, the fragmented interest in programming has gone. And if we believe what we're being led to believe, once technology and bandwidth and once the delivery mechanism is able to provide an experience similar to cable, then I don't know that there's going to be any value in monetizing subscription-based VOD. I think a lot of it will be free.
Open up to questions from the subject we've discussed thus far.
I appreciate all of your comments to this point. I'm a publisher with an ASCAP company and a BMI company. I do not have a SESAC company. I'd like to, tremendous input here, but I'd like to take you back to the down on the street level, if I could, for people that are like me. Maybe I'm the only one in here like me. But the questions I get from my songwriters are, well, what's the difference between BMI and ASCAP? Why should I join one or the other? What are the differences in payouts? That's not been addressed by any, excuse me, any of you yet. Hopefully you can give me some input when the questions are over with. To BMI, I would say to you, it would help if you had online registration of your songs for corporate owners on the internet, if you haven't done that yet. ASCAP, how can a publisher or a writer check to see what's charted? I have stuff I know is being played all over, but we're not getting royalty checks. It's probably under the minimum. How can we find out? Is there a way? Harry Fox, how do we, who goes after the pirates, the people that aren't paying the royalties that are in the big lot stores and stuff like that? Do you do that, or does nobody do that?
Well, we do that working with our publishers.
Okay, so they would find it and bring it to you then. Okay.
It comes in a variety of ways.
SESAC, I don't have a SESAC writer, so I don't have a SESAC company, but I was told that to become a SESAC writer, you had to have a charted hit. Is that true?
No.
Okay. I'm glad to know that's not the case.
We can begin there. I think where that rumor comes from is that SESAC is our business model. Our vision is that we affiliate compelling copyrights, and by that we are basically selective in our process as to writers that come to us, and we spend a great deal of time assessing market value of writers and the commercial viability of their work. We work with grassroots writers on a daily basis, but we are selective about the process. Now, with regard to charting hits, no, that's not the case.
That came from a SESAC writer, by the way, so yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I would encourage you to come see it, come down the street and see.
Would love to. And finally, on Sound Exchange, is it www.soundexchange.com?
That is the website.
That is okay. Where you have your fees. I'm assuming you collect for the record labels, and the rest of you collect for the publishers. Is that correct?
We collect for the performers and the record labels. There's a split 50-50 between the performer.
Okay, but I'm talking about if you have an internet broadcast, who collects for the publishers for that? They do. Okay, that's what I thought. That's it. I mean, if you can maybe address the fact of how y'all differ in terms of to the writers and the publishers, that might be interesting too.
Differs in the sense that we are a non-performing rights organization, actually a society, that is owned by its members. So from an ownership standpoint, our board is made up of 12 songwriters and composers, 12 music publishers. This one. So I think one of the distinctions in terms of ownership, naturally being a membership organization, our board is elected by the membership. The board runs the organization. I think at a previous panel they talked about transparency, and it was a question of whether a music publisher, how can they get transparent with the organization? Well, with music publishers on your board, you certainly are a transparent organization. As far as the way that we survey performances, I think that's where we are competitive with BMI and SESAC. ASCAP is part owner of Media Guide, which is the largest fingerprinting technology. They are currently actively listening to over 2,500 radio stations, 24/7, 365 days a year. So you would want to look into those things and make your decisions. In this town, Nashville, of course, as you probably know, a lot of it is personal relationships, especially for writers who are starting out or publishers who are starting out. Who's going to be able to help you time that you need it. So a lot of decisions made that way. Michael, do you want to comment on?
No, I'll just say that I think obviously each organization offers its own special things to writers and publishers. And although I'm not in the writer and publisher relations department, I do know that we do have. And Allison is here. She kind of looked at me. We do have an online works registration. Allison Smith is our senior vice president of performing arts. And I don't know whether I don't know what you meant by corporate online works registration. But like ASCAP, we have an incredible technology that we purchased. It's a subsidiary of BMI called Blue Arrow, which is also a pattern recognition technology, which listens to performances all around the country and instantaneously tells you the music that's performed. If we were in a bar with 100 people screaming and I played music on a transistor radio, this technology could pick up what song that was, and in fact it's been tested to do that. So it's a phenomenal technology that meets all of the criteria that BMI was looking for when it was deciding which way to go, and there were many opportunities, and we went with this one. So there are obviously relationships that go into deciding which organization to join. Each organization thinks it's the best, and you're not going to hear me say anything different about BMI.
Equal time.
Oh, that's right.
Point of order.
CESAC?
No, I would just simply like to add, for those of you who aren't in Nashville, it's impossible to do one of these things without discussing the competitive nature between the three organizations as it relates to writers and publishers, because Nashville is such an amazing town for the creative community. I have an advantage because I've done 2 tenures at CESAC. One was in the writer-publisher area. It's a love and a passion of mine. My friends in writer-publisher relations would tell you we pay faster, we pay better, and we pay more often. And that's actually, most of that's based in fact in that we do pay a quarter after the performances are documented. We, like Blue Arrow, we have our own technology. We've been using BDS since 1996. It's over 100 million records processed annually, and that's how we arrive at credits and value factors. I would simply say, somebody said once, CESAC being the smaller of the three organizations, certainly we have the ability to provide service, and we personalize it and take pride in it. But somebody once said, ASCAP and BMI are so much larger, and some of your affiliates have been at ASCAP and BMI previously. What's the deal? In short, in Nashville vernacular, nobody comes to CESAC to make less money. So.
Alan, you want a shot at a pitch for the PRS?
Yeah, that's right. Want to go across the pond now?
But we like the fact that you can join any of the three and still be a member of Sound Exchange. And I will tell you that. Right. Back in 1970, my decision when I affiliated with ASCAP was they offered me a larger advance. It made it pretty easy, actually.
Gentleman in the back.
Bill Velez, formerly with ASCAP, BMI, and CESAC, and now just a pure consultant. This morning we alluded to this notion of a super agency, or the idea of a bundled right, something that I've been a big fan of even when I was president of CESAC. May explain why I'm no longer president of CESAC. But anyway, I just wondered if I could poll, particularly my U.S. colleagues, as to whether you feel a certain inevitability toward movement in that direction of a bundled right super agency, If so, what can you and your organization do to proactively advance that agenda? Or if not, are you in favor of the status quo, or do you have an alternate solution to facilitate the licensing process?
I don't know that I'm the right person, Bill, to be able to really answer it. I mean, in terms of my day-to-day duties in licensing, strictly focused on the rights that we have, the people that are using them, more people that are using them, the new technology areas. I don't know that I see it, in my own opinion, as something that's just over the horizon. I heard what Mr. Gertz had to say in the last panel in terms of the number of rights that are required or needed by certain types of music users, and how difficult it is to get those rights when it comes to performance right, particularly with ASCAP and, as Michael mentioned, with BMI. It doesn't get any easier. I mean, all you need to do is apply for a license, and basically you're licensed. So that's almost instantaneous licensing, and since we are prohibited under our consent decree from being involved with any other right other than the public performance right in musical composition, I don't have any day-to-day need to look at any type of a combined super agency. Anybody else want to comment on that? Gary?
Well, there was a legislative effort last year called CIRA, and it didn't talk about bundling rights, but what it did discuss was to come up with the concept of a designated agent, so that, and there could be more than one of those agents that were out there, based upon, and they could become or qualify based on market share. And so the idea was to replicate the PRO model in the United States, where there are 3 different companies that are able to cover all aspects of the U.S. repertoire for performances. Why couldn't something similar to that exist in the mechanical world? And unfortunately, that legislation died. Obviously, there's always continuous discussion about reviving it. But so there was, in fact, an effort to change the law, because the view of many participants was that Section 115 is, in fact, broken and really needed to be fixed.
John?
The Section 114 license that we administer essentially gives the users the right to stream any work that's protected under U.S. copyright law. So they don't have to worry about all the fractures. They just go ahead and stream. They send us the check, and we have to go out and find people. Our members, obviously, we have, but we have to go out and find those that we don't have. And it's a massive task, but it makes the licensing and the transaction costs for the licensing very simple for the users. And obviously, if you did a similar thing on the 115, stream, you pay, and let the entities here at the table divide it up based on whoever owns the rights. You take it away. You take that onus off the user. You make their job a lot easier. Maybe they should pay the admin fee on that because they're getting a benefit from it. But I think that's something we have to look at, and I personally think that somehow an industry-wide database that has master rights ownership and publishing ownership is a must. It has to be done soon for exactly that reason. People need to be able to find out who owns what in an easy way. And we're certainly committed to partnering with whoever to get that done.
Ron Gertz, and I have to apologize because in 2002, I was the guy who came up with the term designated agent in a negotiation with the RIAA. It was one of the biggest mistakes of my life, because the concept that we now have under the CIRA legislation or under Section 114 is monopolistic collectives that collect on behalf of everybody, and individual sound recording copyright owners and performers, and ultimately through, as would have happened through CIRA, composers and publishers have no choice, none, as to who collects their royalties. They are forced through an unaccountable monopolistic collective. I don't believe individual copyright owners and creators want that system.
If I could respond
to
that comment. Similar to ASCAP, Sound Exchange's board is made up of artist representatives and label representatives, those people whose work is being exploited, is being used, whose royalties are being collected. Who more than those people are going to make sure that we're efficient? They approve our budget every year. They approve our expenditures. And that board it's the usual suspects on the label side, Sony, Universal, EMI, Warner Music Group, who, given market share, get the largest checks, and they have the most interest in making sure that we are efficient. And if we are not efficient, they'll get rid of us. That's pretty clear. On the artist side, you have the unions who collect the money for the non-featured performers and who represent many featured performers as well. You have the Music Managers Forum, the Recording Artists Coalition representing most of the major featured artists. These same people are the major beneficiaries of these royalties. If we're not efficient, they'll get rid of us. As I said, we're a service organization providing a service. I think it's crazy to think that a performer or a label, if you were a publisher, would you really want to have 2 publishing companies, or 3, or 4, or 5, and have to do 5 sets of books because there's 5 entities that you have to go through and pay for 5 different structures to collect the royalties, and also have 5 entities that are now competing with each other with the users? That'll bring the price down. All you have to do is look at outside the United States where the royalty rates for songwriters and publishers are higher than they are here. Right now in France, there was just a great ruling where the royalty rate is about 7%. In the UK, it's about 5%. We're under 3% here in the United States on the musical work rate. So competition in this particular place is not a good idea because it's going to bring the price down. I think that train already left the station.
Get Marvin on this subject.
I'll answer that. It won't be BMI, but we definitely are. But I just want to go back to something you said, Ron. That's why I asked for the microphone. You indicated monopolistic tendencies, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this morning, you can't have it both ways. Because this morning you said you want your users to have it easy, your clients to have it easy, to go to one place to get a license. Well, obviously, whether it be monopolistic or not, there's one place to get a license. And with respect to the performing right organizations, you know as well as I do, with respect to at least 2 of them, and I can't speak for SESAC, both BMI and ASCAP, your clients and you on behalf of your clients have written a letter to BMI, and I'm sure you have written to ASCAP, and they're licensed. So you do have a place to get licenses, and you can't have it both ways to say, well, it's a monopoly, but, they shouldn't be existing, and I want an easy way to get the license. That's all. I mean, you just can't play it both ways. Well, you just said, which one goes by the wayside? BMI, ASCAP, or SESAC, or which 2? About competition? I personally believe in competition. I'm sure there's some people, but I'm sure there's some people in this audience that do not. Okay, well, but you can't have it both ways. That's all.
Hi,
Yes.
I'm going to jump in and speak a little further to what Ron was having to say. I'm kind of a new person starting a new company. I call myself a rights clearance agent. I'm trying to build technologies to better manage this activity for, say, sync licensing, mechanicals, Section 115 issues, to develop technologies that may assist PROs and Harry Fox in the future. And I'm kind of interested in being an independent rights clearance agent that would help all of you. And there are many of us around the country. I have my genre specialties with my master's in music and music ed, of classical, Brazilian music, Latin music, and avant jazz. And that's my area. There are many of us that have specialties. I've also worked in television, in content licensing and trademark licensing, branding. Been all over the place. There are many of us that could be independent agents to form a collective to help you. So that's my concept of building my business.
Okay. Any other questions?
Any other microphones?
Hi, my name is Emily Sexton. I'm Assistant General Counsel at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. I think I probably have the dubious honor of being one of the few people here who represents licensees, having multiple licenses with several of you guys up there. My question, turning away from what we've been discussing, is one of you, I can't remember who, I'm sorry, mentioned YouTube, which I imagine must be an absolute nightmare given the just multitude of bootleg videos and music that appears on YouTube, Google Video, other similar kinds of services. And I'm wondering sort of what kind of plans you have to deal with that in terms of your members who are clearly being infringed on a minute-by-minute basis on all of those services.
Well, Sound Exchange doesn't have audio-visual rights, so I don't have to deal with that issue. Thankfully.
No wonder you volunteered to answer that question.
And our trade association is suing them.
I can say from BMI's perspective, I can't comment on particular negotiations, but YouTube has come to BMI and has asked us for a license. And as I explained earlier, that our automatic licensing mechanism provides them some protection. However, I can't really go further than that.
We're in negotiation.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Bill Stafford from Missing Link Music, and among other things, we track trends and analyze various bottlenecks and pain points along the industry flow through all new media on a worldwide basis. And for the PROs, one of the areas we find that's very interesting has to do with cue sheets, which is more, I guess, Fred Flintstone than Buck Rogers as far as the technology you're talking about. But you have all just released something called Rapid Queue, and I wonder if someone would like to just speak a little bit about that, because it's helping people, especially in the surrogate areas where it's difficult to collect,
I can talk about it briefly.
submit cue sheets more accurately.
I am not the Rapid Queue person for BMI. I've been given a number of demonstrations and obviously know about it. It's something that was in beta testing for a number of years and was officially launched this past August. And it essentially enables producers of audiovisual programming to submit cue sheets which were historically sent in stacks and batches and input manually to input those cue sheets online and have a database housed where they can have their own little home within the Rapid Queue environment and can control the cue sheet submissions directly to BMI and ASCAP.
Yeah,
I believe the CSAC has that.
I'm sorry, Alan, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, that's
data management there?
I'll talk about it. It's kind of my area, and it's a really good question, because I think it's the whole area of cue sheet administration and film administration is going to be key for collecting societies. And if you look at how the film networks are changing and how you get internet TV in Europe is becoming a big thing, and if you speak to these internet TV companies, they know very little about the content and the music content of what they're putting out. So there's a big hole about to appear. And we're really concerned about that on the CSAC level. We're trying to define a strategy to go ahead on how we're going to deal with music cue sheets generally. So we have, on the one hand, we have Rapid Queue, we have other options to deal with it in the US and in Europe. And somewhere along the way, we have to kind of get some focus on how we're going to administer films, because the next big thing will be films in our business. And find ourselves in a big problem in that we may be able to collect the money, we won't be able to distribute it. So I can't give you an answer, but I can give you some reassurance that from the CSAC level and from the CRO's side, we're really looking very closely.
We think, I think you're on Rapid Queue as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. CSAC opted to go with a different system. We work with a data partner called SoundMouse, and we felt like that there were some discernible advantages to that system. One, it's international. The other part of that is its interoperability with other QC databases, which we liked. And also there was the research folks tell me that there was a full complement of analytical functions associated with, you may be familiar with the company, but So that's our data provider, and I think we're very happy with what they provide.
There's a question in the back of the room there.
Well, I'm not sure really if this is the right forum for this question or maybe the next session. Well, my name is Jimmy Borja. I'm a songwriter from the Philippines, and I have had a less than favorable experience with my local PRO. I have a couple of 100 songs recorded there and quite a few hits too. But my performance royalties constitute not even more than 3% of corresponding mechanicals through the years. My question then is, or is it even honorable at all for a songwriter like me to start thinking about, like, perhaps forming a breakaway a PRO? I can see our PRO is not even represented here today.
I don't know that that is the. I don't know that anybody can answer that question on this panel. I think that primarily what we deal with is the licensing, and I think one of your questions has more to do with the distribution. So I don't know how to answer that.
You let me just one last question. My question was: is it possible for a third world territory such as the Philippines to have more than one PRO?
That would be the next.
Patrick
panel.
is saying the next panel will address
The gentleman there.
Hey, it's Charlie Sanders. I'm an attorney and a professor at NYU, and I've been in the business for quite a bit. And I can't help noticing that more than a dozen years after having sued CompuServe, the Internet still does not feature an aggregated site for the purchase of sound recordings. I hate to belabor the compulsory license issue, but isn't there somebody on the panel who wants to talk about how this is killing music publishers and songwriters, that we still have an Internet, that the piracy rate is somewhere north of 94, 95%, and that a lot of that has to be traceable to the fact that there's no unified collective site where people can buy music legally?
Gary,
It's a market solution.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to go into the business.
Yes.
That was brave.
I'm sorry, Charlie. I don't have an answer for you.
I'm Duff Birchback. I'm counsel at Sony ATV Music Publishing. And we, unlike a lot of the music publishers, own a significant catalog of masters. So my question is for John. Presently, Sound Exchange relies upon the players of music to report to you, and then you pay out on that basis, much like the PROs on the Circle C side used to, and maybe still are, maybe still get the occasional napkin report from the radio station. But is Sound Exchange going to move at some point to more of a monitoring system, whether it's census or otherwise, instead of relying on the players to report its data? And then secondarily, is there anybody else besides Sound Exchange that if there was a terrestrial performance right tomorrow who could administer it?
The first question, we've looked into some technology where we could put boxes on servers and monitor what's going across the server, where we would be collecting the data ourselves. And that is something that we will look at as we move forward. Maybe partly a cost issue. Obviously, you got to get the licensees to agree to put these servers, these boxes on their servers. But it is something that we are looking at so that we can control that collection of data. On your second question, rephrase that for me, just refresh my recollection.
On terrestrial
I'm getting
another collector.
Is there anybody else besides
I didn't
Sound
want to
Exchange?
think about that. That's why I.
Okay.
We're obviously.
Pregnant pause. It was good.
Thank you. We're the likely candidate to do it. I would think, given the value of it, there'll be plenty of people who will want to get into the business.
question back there.
I should also mention, if a terrestrial were to come along, it seems to me there's already established technologies that have been created for or in conjunction with the companies that I'm sitting here with that can actually monitor that. And it seems to me that we would probably partner to get that data because it's crazy for us to build what's already been built.
Hello, this is Justin again. I'm the director of licensing at Naxos Classical Music Label. My question is mostly for Gary. We've gone through, obviously, all the mechanicals process, and then we went through our catalog of roughly 100,000 works to get the DPDs. Now we want ringtones, and the policy of Harry Fox so far has been that ringtones aren't covered underneath the DPD license. And so, yet again, we have to go through all of our works. And I'm just curious what the logic is behind these business decisions to say, well, it's not really under a DPD. You're going to have to go ahead and reapply for some different license.
The determination was that it is not a DPD and that it is unique unto itself. And that's how we've interpreted and we've been proceeding, and that's how our publishers wish us to proceed. So, but we could talk about figuring out how to get you licensed up real fast with ringtones.
Okay.
There's an issue that was sort of that John sort of brushed by a little bit when he talked about the Uber database and stuff like that. And the one thing, we talk about licensing and everything else is a piece of cake. But the fact of the matter is that there's this very boring area of technology that is this patchwork quilt that sort of covers the earth and creates its own form of global warming, in the sense that we have, unfortunately, we're an industry that has a huge number of transactions that are going on, 24/7, whether they're financial transactions, whether they're licensing transactions, whether they're reporting transactions, and there's all this stuff that's out there. But unfortunately, the industry does not have a set of acknowledged data standards. And that, so even if we had this one collective, whether it was monopolistic or whether there was competition or whatever that sort of the institution was, the fact of the matter is that the industry has to address, and it's the entire pie, really has to address and be willing to not just engage in the discussion and the creation of these data standards, but also has to be willing to commit to modify their systems and implement those data standards. Because if we don't have those, we'll issue all the licenses, or there'll be a blanket license or whatever. But the fact of the matter is when it comes to have to go and pay somebody, it becomes very, very, very difficult. And a lot of the inefficiencies that exist within the collective system in a small c is exactly those inefficiencies that are brought on by the lack of data standards on a global basis. So, not that anybody in this room is going to solve that, but that's a very boring but very important piece of being able to deal with, the massive use of music around the globe in a variety of different ways to make it accessible, ubiquitous, all of the ways that you want to be able to use your music. But the fact of the matter is there's got to be this thing underneath that makes sure that the information about the licensing gets passed through the system, that the works are available, and that in fact here's all the use information about that particular work. So whether it's on the performance side, whether it's on the performer side, or whether it's on the mechanical side, whether or not all the right people get paid and get paid the right amount. So that's this thing that's sort of bubbling that we who are running the organization really have to face. And Alan can speak globally because it's much more than within the shores of the United States.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. Excellent point. Alan, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, great point. I agree totally with that. The whole business has to revolve around the big data standards. And I think the standards are perhaps better than you're suggesting in some areas, and there's work going on there. Another area we particularly in Europe, are looking at is, okay, so we have great data standards, and we still all end up with doing the same back office work in like 21 different territories or wherever it was. So, I think you're going to see some consolidation in terms of back offices, particularly in Europe. We're already involved in that to some degree. We're forming a shared back office with the Swedish Society of Stockholm. We expect that to go partly live in a year's time with a single copyright database of both organisations offering the service. We're not alone. There are other European societies looking to do exactly the same thing. Fantastic. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a problem. But on top of data standards, there has to be some kind of rationalisation about how we run our businesses and from a back office point of view.
Similarly, we were just in Europe meeting with European societies about setting standardized data models for the neighboring rights, and also to also said it's really important that we end up with a performer database that's standardized, so that everyone knows that Fleetwood Mac in 1975 was different than Fleetwood Mac in 1969. And, the Eagles have changed over time. So you need to know on a track level, if you're paying on track level, who the makeup of that band was at any particular time. And standardizing that between collecting societies is a really critical feature that we're all working on as well.
Yes.
I'm Neville Johnson. I'm a lawyer. I represent artists and rights holders. For Mr. Simpson, I understand that if you don't find an artist or he doesn't come to your organization within a certain period of time, it just goes into your general fund. Is that right?
I think you'll find that every collecting society has rules about black box, essentially, about money that can't be distributed. With us, the Copyright Office regulation says that after 3 years, if someone doesn't make a claim for their money, that it gets redistributed to all the other performers and rights owners who are in the system at the time.
Well, the reason I say that is I just registered 2 artists who were, one of whom is a household name in America, and the other one is very well known in his genre. And I see that you have some 8,000 people that you supposedly can't find. I'm wondering what you're doing to find these people and let them know, because I think there's a lot of people who just plain are ignorant.
Well, it's interesting. When we first launched, we were talking to other societies, and it took them about 10 years to get to 90% of their performers. And those were smaller countries in the United States. We've gotten to about 75% in the United States in about 6 years. So I think we're making good progress. Obviously, there's a lot more to be done. Of the 8,000 performers that we were looking for, 2/3 were owed $50 or less. We followed the dollar. We started at the top of the list and worked our way down. Obviously, it's going to take us a while to get to the long tail, essentially. We've done a lot of conferences. We're out at all the big music conferences like South by Southwest or NEMO in Boston, whatever they may be, all the Billboard conferences, trying to get the word out. We do a lot of media. We've tried to do as much as we can to get the word out, telling other artists, please spread the word. It seems particularly difficult. I would say about 50% of the people left on the list are foreign. We've gone to the foreign performing rights societies and said to them, look, we have a lot of money for your performers. Please, let's do reciprocal deals. Let's exchange data. I think there's a little bit of reluctance on their part because they're worried they're going to have to pay U.S. performers, which they've historically not done. But again, about 50% of the list is now foreign. There still are some people on that list, who, given time, we will find. The other thing that I did, and my board did actually, and we extended the deadline twice. The Copyright Office regulation is 3 years. We extended it to 4 and then to 5 years. So in the first monies that we collected from 96 to 2000, distributed in 01, were still available through 2006. So basically, we went back 10 years, which is a lot longer than most societies will go back. Most will go back maybe 3, maybe 5. Some societies distribute, if you have not signed up within a year, it's gone. You can ask the different societies what the rules are. The board also set a reserve fund of 30% of the amount that would have been forfeit, so that if somebody came forward late, particularly a legacy artist or someone who just didn't know about it, that we would be able to make them whole.
Harry, hi. Besides the traditional mechanical, what other formats does Fox currently license for?
Guitar tablature, lyrics, ringtones, let's see, podcasting, you name it. We're looking to go back into the synchronization business.
My name is Ariel Katz. I'm from the Faculty of Law, University of Toronto. I have a provocative question for the panel.
you seem to be all agreeing that it would be a great thing if there was some standardized metadata reporting and so forth. And it also seems to me that you are the entities who are best located to advance such initiatives. But on the other hand, I would also assume that if there is such a metadata infrastructure out there, it could be easily used by other people to create a much more competitive marketplace that would actually undermine the existence of many of you. So perhaps that's the explanation why there is quite a reluctance to actually go forward with those initiatives.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand that we would not go forward. I mean, there is an initiative right now called DDEX that there are some members here in the room who are also on that board and are participating, and that includes record companies. It includes digital users like Microsoft and things like that. So, I mean, the idea is that the standards would be available and open and accessible, and in terms of putting people out of business, I mean, that's the competitive environment, and whether you adopt or adapt, that's the choice of the organization. I'm not sure exactly how that sort of would wash somebody out, per se, other than it would become much more efficient. But, of course, it's the choice of the organization to decide to implement.
I think that would be a question you might want to ask tomorrow afternoon at 2:30 on panel 7.
Okay.
Anyone mind about it?
For a sound exchange question, Mr. Simpson, I understand that the compulsory right for that digital sound recording is limited to non-interactive streams. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If so, do you have any plans to license beyond that compulsory right for the interactive streams that become so much more popular?
Our rights are limited to non-interactive streaming. There is no bright line definition of where interactivity starts and non-interactivity stops. There was recently the Sony Launchcast case decided by a jury in New York that said that a user-influenced site wasn't interactive, although it seems to me if you're looking at a statute and deciding whether something's interactive or not, is that a jury question or is that a question that a judge should have decided as a matter of law? It's been a while since I've practiced law, so I could have that wrong, but so I think that case on appeal is going to get overturned. That's just my own feeling. I really don't know what's going to happen. I do know that there's certainly interest on our part to perhaps go in and define more clearly where the interactivity line is, and perhaps have interactive services licensed at maybe an uplift of 25%, 50%, whatever is the right number for the marketplace. But right now, interactive services need to get licensed by the exclusive owners of the copyrights on the sound recording.
I understand on the basis of what I've heard from John Simpson that there are bilateral agreements with some European societies. I'd like to know on what basis these agreements have been concluded, because the United States is not a party to the Rome Convention. Unfortunately, the majority of European Union member countries are not party yet to the WPPT. It is just because they collect, they are ready to transfer this. I'm very happy to hear that.
We are too. Actually, we've only gotten a few of these done because there is a reluctance. Although I think the WPPT is coming, and I think a lot of the societies have been coming forward to us and saying we really need to get a deal done before we ratify, or by the time we ratify. Right now, we're collecting primarily like for like, or digital, their webcasting in exchange for our webcasting money. We certainly pay everybody around the world who comes and asks us for their royalties. Well, we'd like it to be reciprocal. Right now, I mean, for example, I pay Irish performers, they don't pay me. I pay Brazilian performers, and they don't pay me. We have felt that we will pay performers who are owed the money because they've earned it. Their stuff is being used. We also think the Europeans and South America should be paying us when our performers' material is being used. We do get qualified recording money, so when a U.S. performer records in a Rome country, that's known as a qualified recording in many territories, and they will pay us for those. So the Dutch pay me for Americans who've recorded in Canada or Americans who've recorded, outside the United States. The Spanish Society, I hope we're like weeks away from signing our reciprocal with them. So they haven't paid me yet, but I'm hoping very soon. And it's been a long negotiation, but I think we finally are just about ready to sign with them. And that's Performer Society.
I think the clock on the wall is telling me we may have time for one more question. Gentleman who's got his hand up first.
I was wondering about how you guys track synchronization uses on broadband.
Identify yourself first, please.
I'm Brian. I work for MTV. I was wondering how you guys track synchronization uses on broadband channels and user-generated sites such as YouTube, and how you distribute the monies.
That is not my area at ASCAP. If there is
right, BMI licensing performing rights, we don't at all track the
in essence, we're really good at bringing in the money, but we really don't have that much to do with how it gets distributed. Well, I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you.